The first time Harold Grant saw the 8th balcony, he thought he was still dreaming. Maybe he told himself later he should have left it at that, a dream, a trick of the eyes. Late-night hallucination brewed from sunburn, cheap beer, and the leftover ache of a life gone wrong. But Harold was the kind of man who had to count things, had to know where everything fit. And when you moved into a place with 7 balconies, and then you saw 8, well, the math didn't add up. The Costa del Sol had been meant as his fresh start. 53 years old, newly divorced, and retired a little too early for his own good, Harold needed sun, air, and silence. Spain promised all 3. The apartment number 71 in a white high-rise called Edificio Mar Azul was perfect on paper. Marble floors, granite countertops, and 7 balconies, each with a dazzling view of the endless Mediterranean. 7 balconies, one for every day of the week. That was what sold him, if he was honest. It's not the spacious kitchen or the clean lines of the minimalist furniture. It was the balconies. He had a thing for balconies, always had. They were in between spaces, neither inside nor outside, perched on the edge of the world. You'd stand there with a drink in your hand and pretend you were a king surveying your kingdom, more a prisoner testing the bars. The real estate agent, a fast-talking Spaniard with a too-wide smile, had made a joke when Harold first stepped into the apartment. "You'll get sick of the view center. Everyone does." But Harold never tired of the sea. He liked the way it shifted moods without warning. Gray one morning, blinding blue the next, as temperamental as a child. He liked the sound of gulls squabbling overhead, the faint smell of salt and fried sardines drifting up from the beach below. He liked the slow, steady pulse of cargo ships passing on the horizon at night. 7 balconies, a neat perfect number. But symmetry has a way of breaking when you least expect it. And Harold Grant would come to learn that the 8th balcony had been waiting for him all along. It was the 3rd night when he saw it. The day had been hot enough to melt his skin. He'd wandered the beach, drank too much cerveza with a couple of leathery Brits, and stumbled home sunburned and woozy. He fell asleep on the living room couch with the sliding doors cracked open, the waves rolling him under like a lullaby. At 3:17 a.m., Harold woke to a draft. Not a strong one, just a whisper of air, brushing his cheek. He sat up, blinking, his tongue dry, his stomach sour from beer. The living room was dark, but across the way something shimmered. A curtain stirred, though the rest hung still. And there, a door. A glass terrace door, just like the others. Only this one didn't belong. Harold knew his apartment already, had mapped it out in his head the way a boy memorizes his baseball cards. 7 balconies, each with its own door. He'd walked them all, leaned over their railings, breathed in their sea-bright air. 7, always 7, but now there was an 8th, stood half open as if inviting him. Beyond it lay a balcony tiled not in white, but in black, slick, glistening as though wet, and past the railing. No horizon, no beach, no moonlit sea, only water. Flat, endless black water stretching to infinity. Harold's chest clenched, his ulcer burned like fire. He stumbled forward, then stopped short, his breath rattling. Something about that water, its stillness, its depthless dark, pulled at him like a rope tugging at his sternum. He slammed the door shut, the glass rattling in its frame. And when he turned to look again, the 8th balcony was gone. Only blank white wall remained. By morning, Harold convinced himself it had been a dream. The kind you carried with you like a hangover, heavy and sour, but already beginning to fray at the edges. He made coffee, carried the mug onto one of the ordinary balconies, the real ones, and let the Spanish sun burn the fear out of him. 7 doors, 7 balconies. Counted them again, walking from room to room with his mug in hand. Bedroom 1, bedroom 2, the little office, the living room, the master, the kitchen, the dining nook, each with its own glass door, each leading to its proper balcony. 7, always 7. The night had played a trick on him, that was all. A man could dream a door the way he could dream, teeth falling out or standing naked in a classroom. Still, the memory itched. When the cleaning woman arrived later that morning, he asked her, "Do all these apartments have 7 balconies?" Her name was Clara. She was a round-faced woman in her 60s. Her gray hair wound into a bun so tight it pulled the corners of her eyes. She paused with her mop, and gave him a look, one of those careful looks people give when they want to show their cards. A center. 7. Not 8. He tried to make it sound like a joke. She laughed, but not like it was funny. More like she wanted the conversation over. No. 7, then. Softer. Almost to herself. 7. Always 7. Something in her tone pricked Harold's skin. Later, on his way down to the beach, he bumped into one of the other tenants in the elevator. A tall German man, wiry, his skin the color of boiled leather, his eyes rheumy with age. They exchanged pleasantries in broken Spanish, then English. And Harold, because he couldn't let it go, asked again. Strange question, but... You ever hear of an apartment in this building with 8 balconies? The man's smile faltered. He licked his lips like a nervous dog. 8, he said. His accent made it sound like 8. No, not real. Stories only. What kind of stories? But the man shook his head sharply, as if the question itself were dangerous. Forget it. You are new. Forget it. And when the elevator reached his floor, he got out without a goodbye, leaving Harold alone with the hiss of the cables and the faint smell of rust. That night, Harold lay awake on the couch, with the television blaring and every light on. He told himself he was being silly. He told himself there was nothing to fear in a building full of retirees and sunburned tourists. But sometime after 2, he heard the curtain whisper again, and his heart went cold. That night, Harold did what any sensible man would do when confronted with a mystery he didn't want solved. He tried to drown it out. He poured himself 3 fingers of cheap Spanish whiskey. Let the TV run a dubbed soap opera with actors whose lips never matched their voices, and tried to convince himself he was simply too tired, too old. At 2:41 a.m. the lights flickered. The TV hissed with static, the way old TVs used to when the world went to snow. Harold sat up, glass in hand, stomach twisting, and there it was again. The curtain, swaying though the night was still, the shimmer of glass where no glass should be, the 8th door waiting. This time, he wasn't alone. A figure stood on the balcony. It was a woman, her silhouette etched in silver against the black water. Her hair was long and stringy, clinging to her shoulders. She wore a white sundress, the fabric plastered to her body, as though she had just climbed dripping from the sea. She didn't move, she only stood, head tilted slightly as though listening. Miss Harold croaked. His throat felt tight, his tongue heavy. The woman turned her head not fully, just enough that he caught the pale gleam of her cheek. Then she stepped forward, into the dark. The sound of a splash carried faintly into the room. When Harold staggered to the glass door, fumbling with the handle, the balcony was empty. Only the endless black water stretched out, calm and silent as a shroud. He slammed the door shut. His hands trembled so badly, he nearly dropped the whiskey glass. The next morning, the building buzzed with whispers. A tenant had gone missing during the night. A young Swedish woman named Ellen, living in 802. She'd been seen on her balcony around midnight, smoking. By dawn, she was gone. No note, no trace. The police said suicide. Maybe she'd jumped into the sea. But no body washed ashore, and the currents weren't strong enough to drag her away. Some of the older residents shook their heads and muttered in languages Harold couldn't understand. He said nothing. Not a word about the balcony. Not a word about the woman in white, because deep down Harold knew. What he had seen wasn't Ellen jumping. It was Ellen being called. The more Harold tried to ignore the 8th balcony, the more it seemed to seep into him. Daylight made everything rational. He read paperbacks on the beach, ate plates of anchovies fried in oil, practiced his terrible Spanish with shopkeepers who humored him. Under the sun, the world was ordinary, solid. 7 balconies. A man could count them as often as he liked. 7, never 8. But when the night came, the door came with it. At first, it was once every few nights. Then it was every night, like clockwork, always between 2 and 3. And every time Harold felt something pulling at him, not like a voice, not like a hand, but like a pressure in his chest, tugging, urging, like the black water was calling him by name, though no sound reached his ears. Once, he swore he saw Ellen standing out there again, her pale face upturned, her eyes empty as the sea. she wasn't alone. There were others beside her, shapes, silhouettes, figures he couldn't quite make out, all shoulder to shoulder on the balcony that shouldn't exist, staring silently into his apartment. And every time the urge to step out grew stronger. He started drinking more. He slept with the lights on. He told himself he was losing his mind. Maybe had been losing it for years without realizing. The ulcer gnawed at him like a rat. His dreams were thick with water, with tides pulling him down into the dark. One morning, Clara, the cleaning woman, found him standing in the living room barefoot, staring at a blank wall. His eyes were bloodshot, his lips cracked. "Sinar, are you ill?" she asked softly. Harold blinked at her like a man waking from a trance. "Do you hear it?" "Hear what?" "The water," he whispered. "When it comes, it calls." Clara went pale. She made the sign of the cross over her chest and refused to clean that day. That night, Harold stayed awake with the TV blaring. But when the door whispered open, he found himself already on his feet, glass in hand, moving toward it like a man walking in his sleep. The black balcony yawned wide. The water waited. And Harold Grant was not sure how much longer he could resist. The next morning, Harold couldn't keep it bottled up anymore. He needed answers, or at least confirmation that he wasn't unraveling. He went downstairs to the little cafe across the street where the residents of Edificio Mar Azul often gathered. Splode of burnt espresso and fried churros. The tables crowded with retirees from England, Germany, Norway. Most were leathery and tan, their laughter too loud, their lives reduced to sun, gossip, and cheap wine. He found the German man from the elevator, sitting alone with a coffee and a folded newspaper. "Mind if I join you?" Harold asked. The man gave a shrug, the kind that meant "I'd rather you didn't tea, but I am too polite to say no." Harold sat, ordered a cortado, and leaned in. "You said last time, stories. About 8 balconies." The man's roomy eyes darted up, then back to his paper. "I told you forget it. I can't forget it." Harold's voice cracked more than he intended. "I've seen it. The door. The balcony. A woman, Ellen." At that, the man's hands trembled slightly. His coffee rattled in its cup. He folded the paper with care and set it aside. "You should leave this building, rent somewhere else, move to. Anywhere but here." "Why?" Harold pressed. The man hesitated. Did. His lips pursed, as if weighing whether truth was worse than silence. Then he spoke, low and halting. "Since the building opened, people vanish. Always from higher floors. Tenants, tourists, doesn't matter. At night, no one sees them again. Disappearances?" "Sir," the man nodded grimly. "They say there is a door, a balcony that is not real. Some call it a curse. Others say the sea is hungry and the building feeds it. Every few years gone," Harold's heart thumped. "You've seen it." The German shook his head hard. "Too hard." "I never see." "But my wife?" His voice cracked. He looked away, eyes shining. "She vanished. 10 years ago. I live alone now." The silence between them was heavy as lead. Finally, Harold whispered, "Why don't you leave?" The man let out a small, hollow laugh. "Where can I go? The sea is everywhere." When Harold returned to his apartment, the walls felt closer than before. He counted the balconies again. 7. Always 7. But the German's words gnawed at him like worms in fruit. A door that was not real, a balcony that was not meant to exist, and a hunger that never stopped. That night, Harold didn't drink. It wasn't because he was strong or brave or ready to confront whatever the hell was happening. It was because he wanted to see clearly. He needed to know if this was real or just whiskey dreams and ulcer pain. Turned off the TV. He left the lights burning. Sat on the couch with his hands folded in his lap like a man waiting for bad news. The clock ticked. 2:07 a.m., 2:31 a.m., 2:59 a.m., then a draft, the whisper of a curtain. The 8th door shimmered into being, and with it came the black balcony, wet tiles glistening faintly in the glow of his floor lamp. Beyond the railing stretched that endless dark water, smooth as glass, no horizon, no stars, and she was there again. Ellen, the white sundress clung to her like seaweed, heavy and soaked. Her hair hung in slick ropes across her face. But this time, she didn't stand still. She stepped closer, closer to the glass, closer to him. Her face pressed against the door, pale as bone, eyes wide and empty. Her lips moved soundlessly. She was speaking, but the water seemed to swallow the words before they reached him. Harold's chest squeezed, his breath caught. He leaned forward without meaning to, straining to hear. Her mouth moved again. 3 syllables, slow and deliberate. "Come with us." His knees buckled. He found himself halfway across the room before he realized he'd even stood up. His body moved like a puppet tugged on strings, each step heavy and wrong. "Stop," he rasped, though whether to himself or to her he didn't know. Ellen's hands pressed flat against the glass. Water trickled from her fingertips and streaked the door, dripping onto the floor. The salt stung Harold's nostrils, sharp and real. He reached for the handle. His fingers brushed cold metal. Then bang! Sound cracked the air, sharp as a gunshot. Harold jerked back, heart pounding. The door was gone. The balcony gone. Only white wall and a trembling curtain remained. But the floor where Ellen had pressed her palms stayed wet. For the rest of the night, Harold sat in the corner of the room, eyes locked on the spot, watching the salt water dry into pale streaks across the tiles. By dawn, he knew one thing with grim certainty. The balcony wasn't just an illusion. It could reach across. It wanted him. Harold thought daylight would break the spell. It usually did. Dreams, hangovers, hallucinations, they had a way of dissolving under the Mediterranean sun. But this followed him. He stood on the balcony, the real one, the 7th, squinting at the glittering sea. Tourists laughed below. Umbrellas bloomed across the beach like colored mushrooms. The water was busy with jet skis and children paddling inflatable flamingos. And yet, when Harold shut his eyes, he heard only one thing: the hush of dark water, the whisper of her voice. "Come with us!" He snapped his eyes open. The bright beach was still there, alive and harmless. But when he checked his watch, his heart lurched. He'd stepped onto the balcony at 10, had no memory of the lost hour. The next day, it happened again. This time, 2 hours gone. The sea pulled at him, a low, insistent hum. He caught himself leaning over the railing, staring not at the beach but at the line where the water touched the horizon, as if some invisible hand were pointing. "There, that's where you belong." He stopped shaving. He stopped cooking. He kept the blinds drawn. But the pull didn't stop, it only grew. At night, the 8th door appeared without ceremony now, as if it had been there all along, and Harold had simply failed to notice. He could feel it before it formed, a pressure, a tightening in his chest. As if the apartment itself inhaled before opening its lungs to the sea. And Ellen came closer each time. Sometimes her face, sometimes just her hand on the glass. Once, her head cocked at a strange bird-like angle, as if listening to something Harold couldn't hear. Her eyes never blinked, her mouth never smiled. Always the same 3 words: "Come with us." By the 5th night, Harold had developed a ritual. He set chairs against the 8th door. He stacked them like barricades. Sometimes he even dragged the couch across the tiles until it scraped like thunder. It never mattered. The moment he blinked, the furniture was gone, moved, rearranged, as if the apartment itself conspired to clear the way. And when he pressed his hands over his ears to block her whisper, the sea rushed in louder. Salt water in his skull, in his veins. On the 6th night, Harold woke to find himself standing barefoot at the threshold of the 8th balcony, his hand on the handle, the door already half open. Behind him, the apartment was dark and silent. Before him, the water stretched endless and black, the air thick with brine. Ellen stood there, waiting, her wet dress clinging to her bones. Her lips moved. This time, he heard her clearly. "It's time." Harold told himself he wouldn't open the door. He swore it, said it out loud, like an oath. But words are weak against the tide. That night, when the 8th balcony shimmered into being, the handle was already warm beneath his hand. He didn't remember walking there. He didn't remember unlatching it. One second, he was lying on the couch with a blanket over his shoulders, and the next, the salt air pressed into his lungs like a fist. The door creaked open. The black water rolled endlessly beyond the railing. No stars above, no horizon. The world was swallowed whole, and he wasn't alone. Shapes moved out there, half seen, slick, glistening like seals in moonlight. Only these weren't animals, these were people. Human shapes bobbing just beneath the surface, faces upturned, eyes open and gleaming like pale stones. Dozens of them. They swayed gently in the water, lips moving in unison, as if chanting underwater. Their mouths opened, closed, opened again, spilling no sound. Ellen stood among them. Only she was above the water, her bare feet on the balcony's wet tiles. She extended her hand to Harold, her fingers pale and wrinkled, as though she'd been submerged for hours. "It's time," she whispered again. His chest heaved. His hand reached out on its own, trembling, stretching toward hers. One more step, and he would be over. One more breath, and the dark water would claim him. "No," he roared, ripping himself backward so hard he slammed into the wall. The impact rattled his teeth. The door snapped shut like jaws. The 8th balcony vanished, dissolving into nothing. The apartment returned, lamps, curtains, shadows. Harold slid down the wall, gasping. His hands shook so badly he couldn't light a cigarette. He dropped the pack. The lighter clattered to the floor. Thoughts burned his eyes. He wasn't a man who cried, not since he was a boy, but fear ripped through him like broken glass. Understood something now. It wasn't just Ellen. There were others. A whole drowned world waiting beyond that door. And if he gave an if he so much as slipped, he would join them. By the next afternoon, Harold knew he couldn't stay in silence. Not with what he'd seen. The world outside the 7th balcony was still obnoxiously normal children dragging sand buckets. Lovers walking hand in hand, the kind of postcard life people paid fortunes to capture. But inside his apartment, the walls seemed to breathe. Shadows stretched too far. Every time he passed the glass door, he swore he heard a faint dripping as though water were seeping through from the other side. He needed someone else to confirm it. Someone to say, yes, it's real. You're not losing. Your mind. So, for the first time in days, Harold left his unit. The hallway smelled faintly of chlorine and stale cologne, the typical perfume of vacation rentals. He pressed the elevator button, but stopped when he heard a voice echo from the stairwell. Low, rough, muttering, "Don't open, don't answer, don't." Harold froze, listening. Curiosity or maybe desperation dragged Harold toward the sound. He descended 2 flights until he found the source. A door half open, the smell of mildew spilling out, was a man who looked like he'd been dragged up from the bottom of the sea himself. His skin was gray and sagging, his eyes sunk deep, rimmed with red. Around him lay dozens of empty wine bottles, old takeout containers, and newspapers yellowed with age. When Harold's shadow crossed the threshold, the man's head snapped up with a violence that made Harold flinch. "You see it, don't you?" The man hissed. Harold's throat tightened. "See what?" The old man laughed, a sound like rocks scraping together. "Don't play dumb. You've heard them. The whispering, the knocking at night." Harold stepped inside despite every nerve screaming not to. The balcony. The old man's smile widened, showing teeth gone brown and broken. "Ah, so it's open for you too." Harold felt sick. His stomach churned, like he was back on a stormy boat. "What is it?" The man leaned forward. His breath stank of rot and old wine. "It's the 8th door. It doesn't belong here. Never has. But once you see it, once it finds you, there's no going back." "Why?" Harold's voice cracked. "What's on the other side?" The man's eyes darted to the wall, as if listening. Then he whispered, "They're waiting." Silence fell so heavy Harold thought his ears had stopped working. "Who?" he demanded. The man's cracked lips trembled. He looked suddenly smaller, like a child confessing to a priest. "The ones who went before us, the lost, the drowned. They call you by name, don't they? They show you someone you loved. It's how they get you. It's how they've always gotten us." Harold's chest went cold. He thought of Ellen, how her hand had reached for his, how her lips had shaped those words. "They got my wife," the man whispered, tears cutting clean lines down his filthy cheeks. 2 years ago, I've been hiding ever since. But it doesn't matter. The sea doesn't forget. It wants us all." Harold staggered back, bile rising in his throat. This wasn't just him. This wasn't grief or madness. This was a trap that had been here long before he arrived. It wasn't finished yet. Harold didn't sleep. He tried. God knows he tried. He stretched out on the king-sized bed with its white sheets that smelled faintly of lavender detergent. And he told himself he could ignore it. Ignore the whispering. Ignore the whispering. Ignore the pull of that 8th door. But the sea has a way of calling you, especially in the dead hours of night when the rest of the world is still. By 3:11 a.m., Harold sat up, sweating. The air was heavy, almost wet, as if he'd been breathing underwater. The apartment was quiet, too quiet, but beneath the silence, he heard it. The faint scrape of glass, the balcony door sliding open. He hadn't touched it. Every hair on his arms rose, stumbled to his feet, the floor cool under his bare soles, and stepped into the living room. The 8th balcony door was open, curtain billowing inward, carrying with it the smell of brine and rot. The apartment's other balcony's 7 neat glass doors were shut, locked, invisible in the night. Only this one breathed. Only this one wanted. And beyond it, the dark water stretched endlessly, swallowing the horizon. Harold. The voice was soft, broken, threaded with pain. Out. Elend's voice. He froze, his throat constricted. Come back to me, the voice begged. I'm waiting. Just one step, Harold, please. The curtain brushed his arm like fingers. The sea sighed. His chest felt tight, his ribs shrinking inward with each heartbeat. Shh. She's gone. She's dead. This isn't her, but grief makes you stupid. Loneliness makes you reckless. And Harold had been carrying both for far too long. He took a step toward the door. The glass frame quivered, just slightly, like it was alive. The air grew colder, wet mist curling in from the void. Behind him, the apartment gave a sound, an almost imperceptible thunk, like a lock sliding into place. He turned his head sharply. Every other door, every other exit, was gone. The hallway where he'd come in, the kitchen, even the bathroom, swallowed by shadows that stretched unnaturally deep. The apartment was closing in. Harold Ellen whispered again, closer this time, as though she were inches from him, her breath warm on his ear. His knees buckled, his hands trembled. He wanted to scream, but no sound came. The 8th balcony stood open, a black mouth waiting to devour him. And in that moment, Harold realized he didn't have a choice. The building didn't let anyone leave. Not really. One by one, it drew them out into the sea. And tonight, it was his turn. The night pressed in around him like a coffin. Harold stood at the threshold of the 8th balcony, his bare feet just inches from the wet tile that gleamed like black glass. The ocean beyond it whispered, not with waves, but with voices, hundreds of them, rising and falling in a chorus. They weren't screams. They weren't cries. They were prayers. He clung to the doorframe like it was the last solid thing in the universe. Ellen, he croaked, throat raw. If it's you, show me. The mist parted. She stepped forward out of the dark, her dress sodden and clinging to her bones. Her skin had the gray pallor of drowned flesh, her hair a halo of dripping seaweed. Yet her eyes, God help him, her eyes were the same as they'd always been, blue and gentle. It's me, she whispered. It's always been me. Just don't fight anymore. You'll feel better once you let go. Her hand rose, trembling palm up. He could see the water dripping from her fingertips, dark drops splashing onto the tile that disappeared before they hit the ground. He wanted to run. He wanted to slam the door and barricade it with every stick of furniture in the apartment. But his legs moved of their own accord. He stepped onto the balcony. The cold hit him like a wall, salt stinging his lungs. He staggered forward. Ellen smiled, lips cracked and blue, and reached for him. The chorus swelled. Faces broke the surface of the water below. Men, women, children, all pale, all drowned, all whispering his name. Some were strangers. Some weren't. He swore he saw his father's face among them, lips moving soundlessly. He saw the neighbor from Unit 5 who vanished months ago, her eyes blank and hungry. He saw shapes that weren't human at all, slick and too long, their jaws unhinged as they swam just beneath the others. The black sea stretched forever. No horizon, no dawn. It's only that door at his back. Harold turned. It was gone. No apartment. No walls. Only the balcony floating in the endless dark, supported by nothing. Ellen, his voice cracked. I can't. Yes, she said, her tone suddenly sharp, commanding, not hers at all. You already have. Her hand gripped his wrist, ice cold, and pulled. He screamed as the world tilted. The chorus surged louder, their mouths gaping, ready to swallow him whole. The water rose up, not lapping, not splashing, but reaching, like 1,000 grasping hands. The last thing Harold saw was Ellen's face splitting apart, her jaw stretching too wide, her eyes sinking into black pits. The smile that followed was not his wife's. It was the sea's. The ocean closed over him with a soundless gulp. When dawn broke over Costa del Sol, the apartment stood silent. 7 balconies gleamed in the early sun, glass doors locked tight. Tourists walked by on the beach, sipping their coffees, laughing, unaware. None of them saw the faint shimmer of an 8th balcony above, high and impossible, lingering for a moment like a mirage. And if they had looked closely, very closely, they might have noticed the figure standing there in the mist, pounding silently on the glass from the other side. A new tenant. Forever.